Courage can be a funny thing. It looks different for everyone. It looks different for each of us, and it even looks different as we grow, age, and evolve. I was recently thinking about a moment from my childhood where I lacked confidence and I wasn't able to stand up for myself and be who I needed to be. And it made me realize just how far I've come. It made me realize just how much I've grown in my own confidence. And I thought it would be fun to reflect on this moment because I want all of you to be able to grow in your own confidence as well. You see, when I was a kid, I wasn't a very confident, self-assured person. Like, I struggled a lot, especially in middle school. Like, I can remember walking in to like the cafeteria in middle school on that first day of school and kind of wanting to shrink and not wanting to be noticed and not wanting anybody to say things to me or pick on me. Like, I was that kid. I was shy and reserved and didn't want anybody to notice me, speak to me, just out of complete fear that they would make fun of me or they would pick on me or I wouldn't have the right friends. And all of those things tormented my little adolescent child brain back then. But then you fast forward now and I speak all over the world and I do keynote lectures and I write books where I share my ideas. And I think about, like, how did that happen? Like, how did that transform? I think about, how did that take place? And I think about my friend Matthew and I when we were in graduate school. Now, I can't tell you when it happened, but I can tell you when I noticed it. Is we went to graduate school, a place called Texas Wesleyan University. Shout out to Texas Wesleyan, the Texas Wesleyan Rams in Fort Worth, Texas. And we had this professor that was super difficult. Her name was Dr. Hensley. And I really enjoyed Dr. Hensley as a person. She's a remarkable person. But she sure did teach a really hard class. It was child development. It was a really incredibly difficult class. And there were 40-something people in the class. And just about everyone failed the first exam she gave, including me and including Matthew. She gave this exam. It was like all essay. And it was the type of exam that's like all essay, and it takes like 5 hours to write it out. I mean, it was back then, those of you old enough to remember, you had to hand write your essays, and like your hand hurt at the end of the exam period from writing. It was really that hard. These days, they type things out, but back then, we had to hand write these essays, and man, it was difficult. And I remember getting a 57 on that exam, which was an F, failing grade. And I was so impacted and so nervous, because if you don't pass this class, you don't get a graduate degree. And you don't get a graduate degree, you don't become a psychotherapist. And everybody in the class is upset, because like the whole class failed. And everybody's bothered, and they're all asking her, why did I lose points here, and why did I lose points there? And I didn't care about any of that. It didn't matter to me to try to recover points on the previous exam. I failed. That's it. So after class, I went up to her and I said, so Dr. Hensley, for the next exam, you want me to tell you everything I know about every subject. Like when you ask a question, you want me to tell you everything. And she said, yes, I want you to tell me everything. I said, okay, deal. The next exam came, I studied, I got a 72, which is not a great grade, but it's not failing. The next two exams, I got high B's and it was able to pass the class. I was one of 9 people to pass the class. Matthew, my best friend, passed the class. And I knew I'd become confident enough. I had developed the courage to face the challenge. Most of the other people dropped out of the class. By the end of the course, we'd gone from 44 people to 9. And I was so proud that I had the courage to face the challenge. I had the courage to face the difficult thing. I had the courage to accept the challenge to figure out how to pass this class, and I did. Now, I'm not telling you when I shifted from the middle school person that was super shy and super nervous and didn't accept challenges to becoming the adult who could take on the challenge. I don't know when it happened, but that's when I noticed it. That's when I noticed that it could happen. And I'm telling you this because if I could do it, you could do it. If I could become the person that can overcome a daunting challenge, then you can too. And I want you to think back to your journey from who you used to be to who you are, and think about how you noticed the shift in your own life. I'm Elliott Connie, and for over 15 years I've been helping hundreds of thousands of counselors support their clients in finding solutions for their everyday lives. And I want to welcome you to the aha moments where I share the life lessons that I've learned in my work and in my life to help inspire you to live your very best life. And if I did that today, please do me a huge favor and share this podcast on your social media platforms or with at least one person that you think could benefit from hearing this message today. And don't forget to subscribe to this podcast on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to your podcast. And I'll see you tomorrow. As a practicing psychotherapist, I see my clients exhibiting courage all of the time. Sometimes it's like in the small things, like getting up in the morning and getting dressed when you're not feeling at your best, or just living life vulnerably and authentically when it's at its hardest. So let's look at what courage looks like in those small situations. Let's look at what courage looks like day to day. Let's look at what courage looks like as people live their wonderful, natural lives. I'm Elliott Connie, and I want to welcome you back to the aha moments where every day I share the lessons I've learned in my work and in my life to inspire you to live your very best life. One of the things I want to make really, really clear, I'm a huge Marvel fan. I'm a huge hero and heroine story person. And I am someone, man, like if you want to suck me into a story, like make it one of those hero stories where the hero triumphs against all odds. I am all in. I want to watch all of those stories. I want to know everything about all of those stories. Like that is the easiest and quickest way to suck me in. But the biggest message I have is that not all heroes, not all people who display courage wear capes or cool costumes. Like I think the biggest way and best way that courage shows up is in the way that we show up in our everyday lives. I'm going to use two examples to kind of make this point. The first one is I can remember being in such a low place in my life that literally getting out of bed and facing the day was an act of courage. I can remember literally just laying in bed thinking, I just want to lay here. I can remember thinking, I just want to lay here and act as though the big bad world is not on the other side of those doors. I just want to lay here and just be. For me, if you look at my life, that's actually the most courageous moments of my life. Those are actually the most courageous times of my life. When knowing that I'm not at my best and the big bad world is out there waiting and everything in you doesn't want to face that big bad world. But yes, you do. But you go on and do it. You find a way to put one foot in front of the other on those most difficult days. That's actually when the courage showed up most for me. But also, I'm going to tell you a client story on what was real courage. I used to do like in-home family therapy, which was sometimes in school family therapy. I would go meet the families in their homes and sometimes the kiddos in their schools. And I remember early in my career, I had this young girl. She was in middle school, and she was struggling with her sexuality. She was struggling with her individuality and kind of finding herself, as a lot of us do at that middle school age. And she was, I guess the best way I can say it is think of someone dressing like really in traditional feminine gender roles. And eventually she realized, like, I have to be myself. She struggled with anxiety and depression and all these things. And she realized, like, in order for me to be happy, I have to be myself. And she began to dress differently. Not badly, but more jeans and t-shirts versus, dresses and skirts. And she went to school, and some of her friends picked on her. Or not friends, but some of the people at school picked on her. And a lot of her friends supported and embraced her. But she eventually, figured out who she was and became the person that she needed to be. And I remember watching her just in awe. Like, the hardest thing to do, especially at that middle school age, is to show up as yourself and be different. And the courage that young girl displayed to do that, it sticks with me to this very, very day. I was just in awe of watching her. And I watched, over the next few weeks and months, I watched her mental health take a huge step in the positive direction. I watched her mental health go from being something she was struggling with to being something that was an asset to her. And that, to me, is real courage. When you have the ability to show up as your true, authentic self,
and allow the world to like judge you how it will, and allow people to say what they will, and understand that I'm not getting up and getting dressed to prove or please anyone. I'm doing this to be who I naturally am. It blew me away, and I've now become an adult that looks at people and I'm amazed. Like I look at people walk their walk and I'm absolutely amazed at the way people live their lives and the way they go about doing things. And if you want to be truly happy in this world, become the type of person that is easily amazed by other people. So you know what I want you guys to do? I want you to make a list of all of the times where you can notice yourself, where you've noticed yourself being courageous and demonstrating the traits of courage. Literally make a list. Even the small things of that one time when you got out of bed and you didn't want to that day, or the one time you said no to a drink, or the one time you made a choice that really required you to tap into your courage. Listen, thanks for being here today. If you wouldn't mind, please do me a huge favor and share this podcast on your social media platforms, or with at least one person that you think could benefit from hearing this message today. And please head on over to Apple Podcasts or wherever it is that you enjoy your podcast and subscribe. And I can't wait to see you tomorrow. It's not every day that you have to draw upon the greatest part of you to do the most courageous thing that you could ever do. But when I think about examples of that level of courage, one story always comes to my mind, and that is the story of a woman named Elizabeth Eckford, who was a student in Little Rock, Arkansas, and she was a member of the Little Rock Nine, who were the students who integrated the Little Rock school system in 1955, I believe was the year. So what was it about her that made her so courageous? What was it about her that made her demonstrate courage even more than the other 8 members of the Little Rock Nine? That's exactly what we're going to talk about here today. I'm Elliott Connie, and I've been helping counselors and psychotherapists help their clients for over 15 years, and I've helped hundreds of thousands of counselors. And now I do this podcast called The Aha Moments, where every day I share the lessons I've learned in my work and in my life to help you live your very best life. And today, I'm really excited to continue to talk to you about courage and share the story of Elizabeth Eckford. See, when I learned about Elizabeth Eckford, I went to Little Rock Central High School to visit, and it's now like a United States historic landmark. And even across the street from there, there's a United States government building where you can get a history lesson and even a tour of the school. I went not knowing Elizabeth Eckford's story, but Elizabeth Eckford was, I believe she was 15 years old, first day of school, and the Little Rock Nine were going to meet in front of Little Rock Central High School, and a woman named Daisy Bates had coordinated how this was going to happen. And then the day before the first day of school, Daisy Bates had a concern, and her concern was she knew there was going to be a mob of violent, angry, hate-filled protesters, and she was very concerned about the kids' safety. So instead of meeting at the school so that the kids wouldn't walk up upon that mob one at a time, she decided to instead have everybody meet at her home. Elizabeth Eckford's home was about a mile away, a couple blocks away from Little Rock Central High School, and she decided it would be better to meet at her home and then all the kids go up to the school together. So she calls all of the kids' families the day before the first day of school and tells them of the change in plans, and 8 of the families received her message. The 9th family, the Eckford family, did not have a phone. So Elizabeth Eckford took the bus to Little Rock Central High School by herself. And she arrived at a school and saw a mob of people screaming hate language that I can't even imagine, spitting upon her, insulting her, threatening her, really awful, terrible things. She got so scared, she tried to enter the building multiple times. There's a famous picture of a United States Guardsman pointing, saying you're not welcome here. She tries to enter the school multiple times. It doesn't work. So she sits on a bus stop bench, waiting on the bus to come take her. She sat there for 47 minutes. This was on the news. Daisy Bates' husband saw this on the news and went to the school and sat on the bus stop with her until the bus came. And the amount of courage it must have taken that young girl to do that. is beyond what I'm able to comprehend. To be so young and be so courageous and go to school knowing that you're going to be met by a hate-filled mob and endure all of that. When she got home, her dress was soaking with people's saliva from having spit on her. Her mom saw her and immediately took the dress off of her. Elizabeth Eckford later said she never saw that dress again. But you know where her courage shows up the most? Where I hear this story and I'm just like the most blown away is you want to know what Elizabeth Eckford did on the second day of school? She went to school. After all of that, the next day, Elizabeth Eckford went to school. I find that story remarkable, that a 14, 15-year-old girl could walk through a gauntlet of hatred, alone, scared, frightened. And the next day, she got up and she did it again. Now, Elizabeth Eckford, the Little Rock Nine are amazing, and lots of them have gone on to have lots of success. Like somebody has a double PhD, and there's lots of business owners and all the things. Elizabeth Eckford's story is a lot more traumatic because the trauma she experienced was a lot more significant. But the courage she displayed is unlike anything I've ever heard, and I hope hearing this story will inspire you to be your most courageous self when you're faced with a challenge as well. I want you to take a second and reflect on the times in your life where you have exhibited courage and how your courage helped the people around you. Elizabeth Eckford's courage helped a generation of African American, actually every generation of African Americans after her. And I just want you to kind of think about your life and what courage have you displayed and how your courage has made a difference in the people's lives around you and in the people who came behind you. Thank you so much for being here, and please do me a huge favor and share this podcast on your social media platforms or with at least one person that you think could benefit from hearing this message today. And don't forget to subscribe to this podcast on Apple Podcasts or wherever your favorite place is to consume podcasts. I really appreciate it, and I look forward to seeing you tomorrow. We all want to be the most courageous and brave version of ourselves. But let's be honest, it's really, really hard to do. And there are tons of reasons for that, but it's really, really hard to do. So what can we do to improve our ability to be courageous and brave and show up and take on challenges? Well, I have 3 tips that I want to share with you today, and that's what this particular podcast is going to be all about. Welcome back to the Aha Moments, where every day I share the lessons I've learned in my work as a psychotherapist and in my life, and I want to help you be the very best version of you that you could be. And today I want to focus on how you can be the most courageous and what you can do to kind of activate your courage. And before I even tell you what these 3 tips are, I first want to give you some really, really good news. Is all of you, everyone who can hear my voice, you have courage and bravery and strength and resilience living inside of you. And it's not about being without fear. It's about doing what is necessary in spite of the fear. You know, I was watching a TV show last night. I'm more interested these days than ever before in TV projects, and I have to kind of do homework to kind of look how TV projects are structured. And one of the people in my entertainment part of my life was telling me I needed to watch the pilot of a TV show called Lost. And so I watched the pilot episode, and I noticed a character named Jack talked about a situation where he experienced a lot of fear. And this woman asked him, how did you deal with the fear? And he said, I let the fear in, and I let it do what it's supposed to do for about 5 seconds, and then I realized I had to get on with it. So I think sometimes we confuse courage and bravery for the absence of fear, but it's not. I mean, fear is going to be present, but it's the ability to carry on and do what's necessary while the fear is present. So let me share with you 3 things that I think are going to be able to activate your ability to show up and be your most courageous self. The first one is I want you to be able to truly identify what courage is, because once you do that, you're going to notice that you have been displaying courage your entire life. Courage is taking that test in the 7th grade when you needed to. Courage is showing up when you didn't feel like your best at work on that day. Courage is any time you intentionally walk into a scenario where you know you're going to face challenges or discomfort, and yet you walk into that scenario anyway. That is true courage. And the first thing I want you to be able to do is to be able to understand what courage is and find examples in your history of you successfully overcoming a challenge, of you successfully demonstrating what you would recognize as courage and bravery and strength. Another thing that really helps activate your courage and your strength, and this might sound weird, but watching for people whose courage and strength you admire, and then being able to repeat, being able to emulate those things. And think about the way that we play as a child. Like, I can remember being a young boy playing wiffle ball, which is kind of a version of baseball, in my front yard, and I would pretend to be a star athlete. Growing up, my favorite baseball player was a guy named Ron Gant, and I would be like 12 years old, and me and my friends would play baseball, and we would choose which star athlete we would be. And sometimes we get into arguments, especially when we're playing basketball. I'm Michael Jordan. No, I'm Michael Jordan. But we do this even as kids, because when we do that, when we're pretending to be Michael Jordan, or in my case playing baseball, when I pretend to be Ron Gant, we kind of take on some of the traits of that person. We kind of take on some of the traits of the person that we are envisioning and the person we are connected to. So think of the people in your life that you admire, either a celebrity or somebody from history or whatever, and emulate the things that you see. The final and third thing that I want you to be able to do that will activate your ability to be courageous and to be brave is to set measurable goals, to set measurable steps on how you will know that you've accomplished the task. So, for example, you don't go through hard things just for going through hard things' sake. Like, you have to be able to set measurable and attainable steps that let you know when you have achieved the outcome. Like, one example of this is, like, when I was a kid playing sports, like, practice was really, really hard. But I knew if I can get through this thing, if I can run these laps or get to the end of practice, it'll be over and I will be able to sit and celebrate that I have accomplished the really hard thing. Now, if you can do these 3 things, I think you'll be so much better at activating your courage and your strength. It'll make a super huge difference in your life. So I want you to practice deploying these things in your life. I want you to practice utilizing these things in your life. I want you to bring this to life in your life. Thank you so much for being here today. If you wouldn't mind, please do me a huge favor and share this podcast on your social media platforms. I truly, really want to reach as many people as possible. And don't forget to subscribe on Apple Podcasts or wherever your favorite place is to consume your podcast. And I can't wait to see you tomorrow. You know what I want you to get more than anything else from listening to this week's podcast of me talking about courage and the importance of courage is I want you to come away knowing that you are strong. You are remarkable. You have the courage to do really, really hard things. I promise you it's true. I promise you it is a part of your story, and I want you to believe it. So I want to welcome you back to the aha moments where every day I share the lessons I've learned in my work as a psychotherapist and in my life so I can help you to live your very best life. And I truly want you to know it. You know, right now I'm teaching an online course about how to use what I do in therapy, which is called solution-focused brief therapy. And we're talking a lot about the beliefs you have to have in people to be able to work as their psychotherapist and do this type of work. And one of the beliefs you have to think about people is they are truly remarkable and they are truly strong and they are truly exceptional. And for those of people out there that are thinking, but what if the person isn't strong? What if they're not remarkable? What if they're not exceptional? That's just crazy. Every single person has examples of remarkability and exceptional behavior and wonderful traits in their past. And we have to help people attend to them because we don't always remember that. Like in our really hard moments, as life is getting really tricky and life is getting really difficult, we don't often remember the evidence of our greatness. We don't often remember the signs and clues of how wonderful we are. We don't often catch it. So we have to work really, really hard to make sure people can catch it. And sometimes you demonstrate your strength by going through something hard. One of my best friends in the world, a guy named Adam Froer, I've talked about him a lot on this podcast. I watched him go through something really, really hard. And what he did was he got really difficult news in 2019 that his wife had breast cancer. And for the next year, he had to go through the emotional roller coaster that was involved in that. He had to be there for his wife. He had to walk that journey with her while being a father and being an employee, like a research professor at a major university. And I watched him demonstrate exceptional and extraordinary strength going through this really, really hard thing. And in other cases, it's you show your courage and your strength by doing something great. Another person that I've talked about a lot in this podcast is a woman named Anna Francis. And Anna Francis did something, like she's a wonderful clinician and she came into my world just as a clinician and she was taking my courses, but she wanted to play a bigger role and she has taught herself how to do the tech associated with my company and make the back end of the company work and make sure the websites do what they're supposed to do and make sure that when you click a link, it takes you where you're supposed to go. She did something great. And each of them, Adam must have had skills and traits and capabilities that made him able to get through that hard thing. Anna must have had skills and traits and capabilities that made her able to accomplish this great thing. But you need to recognize every single person that you meet in your life, including yourself, has great and wonderful traits. And the more you can be aware of that, and the more you can be aware that it's a part of you, then when times get difficult and life gets rough, you can tap into it to manage the rough situation or to accomplish the next great task in front of you. I think the greatest crime of being a human being is most of us walk through life significantly more aware of our flaws and our problems than we are aware of our traits and our greatness. And if you can give yourself one gift, if you can give one gift to the people around you, that gift should be the gift of helping yourself and the people around you become more aware of what makes you great as opposed to the problems that show up in your life. You know, it's a true statement that everybody has problems. Like, that's just a true statement. I don't think anybody would argue that. Well, it's equally true that everybody has greatness. And really, really strong people have the ability to tap into what makes them great and accomplish even greater things. So that's what I'd like you to do is as you walk forward after listening to this podcast this week, as you go forward in your life, I want you to just pay more attention to your own greatness and what makes you stand out as wonderful than you do your problems and you do your struggle. So thanks so much for being here today. Please do me a huge favor and share this podcast on your social media platforms or with at least one person that you think could benefit from hearing this message today. I'm Elliott Connie, and I just want to thank you for being here. Please subscribe to this podcast and leave feedback where you subscribe, whether it's Apple Podcasts or wherever your favorite place is to listen to your podcast. And I can't wait to see you on Monday.